was here that shrooms reigned supreme.
Damn, and now look at them. Damn mushrooms, we eat them in our salad. Mushrooms have fallen off, I'm telling ya. So the title of this video is When the Earth Went Full Subnautica, and that's like one of my favorite games, so I figured I have to give this one a watch.
I don't know if it's just me, but do you ever find yourself imagining that you're on an alien planet?
No.
And for whatever reason, I always imagine these planets to be very strange. Pretty much anything but Earth-like. So barren, jagged rocks, strange smells, strange sights, and just bizarreness all around. And yet, the irony about my imagination is that some of the strangest and farthest stuff from the planet we know of today actually comes from the Earth itself. And what I mean by that is that you and I only experience the Earth as it is now. So by default, we always picture it as it is during the present. Or generally at least sometime whilst you were alive.
Yeah.
However, as you may know, the planet has a history far, far older than any organism on the planet, let alone any of us who are still around, seeing that life first appeared in the speck of dust a few billion years ago at this point. And therefore, it's safe to say that Earth has gone through many different phases. Some have been pretty tame, others questionable, and then a few just downright ridiculous. And this includes one instance of time wherein the Earth would have been nigh unrecognizable to most people, where even the trees, or I guess the forests, being nothing like they are today, with towering fungi dominating the lands instead. So, sounds a bit like a fictional story, and yet this did really happen, just a very, very long time ago, an age now known as the Silurian. When you start going back far enough, it can be sometimes hard to keep up with all the different periods. So, here's where things stand. The Silurian was a period that took place between 443 and 419 million years ago, meaning that dinosaurs still needed to wait a couple 100 million years to even appear.
Basically a long ass time ago. Let's go. I'm not sure I've ever watched a video that was that far back.
And this period transpired following the Ordovician, and would eventually be succeeded by the Devonian, Carboniferous, Permian, and then finally the Triassic period, all in that order. So, to reiterate, we are talking about a seriously prehistoric era. And frankly, this was enough time ago that if I transported you back then, gave you a compass, a map, and some survival equipment, and told you to find your way back home,
You would die.
i.e. where you're from, you would be on a completely doomed mission, seeing that it basically would not help you at all, with not even the continents being in the right places from a modern standpoint, with the land masses instead being arranged in formation that I like to call Island Earth. And this is primarily due to the fact that much more of the Earth was covered by water, with sea levels being about 100 meters or 300 feet greater than present, while the mega ocean, the Panthalassic, stretched as far as the eye could see and essentially enveloped every single landmass, dwarfing even the Pacific. And as a result of this, and, well, the tectonic plates, we would have found the center of a map back then to be an assortment of scattered and fragmented island continents, such as Laurentia, which would one day become North America. And then nearby and connecting, there was also Baltica, Greenland, Orensia, Kazakhstania, so Borat's wet dream, Avalonia, and Siberia. And then meanwhile to the south, you would have found the supercontinent of, not Pangaea, but instead Gondwana, a giant sprawling landmass that was composed of various parts of China, Australia, Antarctica, India, Africa, and Arabia, accounting for 1/5 of all of Earth's total surface,
Damn!
making more than twice the size of present-day Asia. So that's a whole lot of dirt. But here's the thing, dirt was actually somewhat of a foreign concept for the Silurian, which just goes to show how odd the land was back then. And instead, any trekking around would reveal a giant landscape mostly full of dust, clay, dunes, mountains, rivers, and ice, with really the only saving grace here being the temperature. As despite the common rule that prehistoric climate must be pure chaos, the Silurian was actually quite nice, all things considered, with most models suggesting a relatively warm and stable climate, where averages were hotter than the present, being up to 36 degrees Celsius or 96 degrees Fahrenheit in equatorial regions.
I think that's what we get during the summer, right? Like, nowadays, all the summers are 36°C.
Yet not warmer than the Devonian, Triassic, or Permian, which if you see my other videos, would know could be a bit crazy. And it certainly also helped for any time traveler that a lot of the land in the equator was cut up into fragmented pieces, resulting in abundance of tropical islands for your prehistoric getaway. So, in other words, this might start to sound like a pleasant time for a little bit of a stroll. But if you have mycophobia, be warned. Because if you walked in the right places, you'd come face to face with what made the Silurian exceedingly strange.
What is mycophobia? I'm not sure what that is.
And that was giant spikes.
Oh, fear of big things? I don't know.
But don't get it twisted. These weren't some sort of traps left behind by visiting aliens, or some strange geographical feature, but rather what I guess you could say were the trees of the time. A giant spike-like fungi known as Prototaxites. Yup, This is essentially The Last of Us on steroids.
Oh.
As it was here that shrooms reigned supreme, achieving a dominion on land unrivaled by pretty much anything else.
Damn, and now look at them. Damn mushrooms, we eat them in our salad. Mushrooms have fallen off, I'm telling ya.
Making things very weird for the rest of the world. And these fungi weren't exactly the mushrooms or fungus you might encounter today walking around, as they were freaking huge, dwarfing anything else that existed. And based off of fossils, paleontologists estimate that these structures could have been 1 meter, or 3 foot 3 inches in diameter, and as tall as 8.8 meters, or 30
Damn!
feet. So, comparable to the height of a fair-sized weeping willow.
Damn.
Now, obviously, compared to things like the redwood sequoias, which can literally be taller than the Statue of Liberty.
Like, yeah, I'm saying damn, but like, if I go outside and look at a tree, it's gonna be similar height. Actually, like, it just occurred to me that it's just like trees. For some reason, having it be a mushroom made it so weird in my brain, but now that I think about it, yeah, it's pretty normal actually.
This may not seem like much, but for the time, they were insanely big. As for perspective, they were about 10 times bigger than any other organism around, giving it full reign of scenery, so to
That was before all the big creatures came, huh?
speak. However, you'd have to time your visit just right to have witnessed these forests of shrooms, as during the early and middle Silurian, they hadn't actually yet evolved, only appearing in the later days of this period. And you'd also have needed to pick the right spots too, as despite being dominant in size, prototaxites were not found everywhere, instead being located in Canada, Scotland, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Australia, and the US. But despite their widespreadness, they definitely made a quick impression and would have looked exceedingly strange. This was namely because, unlike plants and trees, that, we usually imagine with trunks, branches, and leaves, these guys didn't really follow the same trend, since they weren't plants. And many of the common interpretations have been that they lacked leaves or branches, rather taking on the shape of some sort of oversized stub. They looked closer to an ingrown hair from hell than any kind of flora you've ever seen before. Now, this being said, given its ancient age, we don't know exactly for sure what prototaxites really would have looked like, with the only certainty being that they were weird. And in recent times, their mysteriousness has actually only grown, as one of the more recent suggestions describes them as having been a giant fungal rhizomorph that didn't strictly have to grow vertically, but could also jut out horizontally, or
Interesting.
perhaps even grow in a subterranean manner with the right factors. And just to make things more complicated, an even more recent study, as in this year, has flipped all these previous ideas in their head. Because in a major plot twist, there is now a growing idea that these strange structures were not fungi, and in fact, not part of any kingdom that we know of, not animal, and not plant. Instead, the study suggests that prototaxites are really a whole brand new thing that belong to their own extinct eukaryotic lineage.
Now that's interesting. I'd be so curious to learn more about that.
Which, even for paleontology, is kind of crazy. And this notion from left field, so to speak, came from the realization that prototaxites were chemically distinct from known fungi and structurally different too. As while prototaxites did have tubes similar to what's seen in other fungi, the nature and shape of these tubes were unlike anything seen in coexisting fungus at the time or in any modern day mushrooms. Additionally, the level of chitin found in them was quite different too, being almost absent in prototaxites, which is an important note, seeing that in fungi, chitin plays a crucial role, being a part of the structure that makes up the cell walls, providing rigidness and strength. So, all in all, we may be talking about an already very strange time where the biggest life on the planet can only be described as, simply, life, as again, it might not even be a part of the kingdoms that remain, which is obviously very odd. But no one was judging it back then, and actually his presence was quite welcomed by their life, with these spiked forests having played a huge role in the primitive ecosystems, as at the time, the land was not fertile like it is today. Remember the whole lack of soil thing, and was exceedingly nutrient deficient. And thus the prototaxites might have helped alleviate this problem where they stood, redistributing nutrients across the ecosystem, along with water and oxygen, helping to sustain life that otherwise would not have had a chance. And yes, there was other life on land, so it's possible that fungi, or whatever these things were, wasn't the only thing you'd have encountered. Yet, to see what else lived on this alien Earth, you'd have to focus up a little more, as nothing else came even close to the size of these giant structures.
Well, to be honest, that kind of is a relief. Thinking if he were to really send me back there, I wouldn't be eaten by some giant monster. That is great that there wasn't anything larger than that,
With land plants having been much smaller and rarer at the time. But that being said, they still kept to the general trend of being weird. I mean, just take a look at the Cooksonia, one of the more dominant plants of the time.
I mean, that just looks like a plant that might grow in spore. I've seen that before. What do you mean?
Which more resembles something you'd expect to be growing out of an alien's ear
Yeah.
than the ground.
To be fair, Spore is a game with aliens, so yeah, it makes sense.
And all in all, the flora, or whatever you want to call it, of the late Silurian made the landscape look pretty nutty. Yet, that being said, there were actually some recognizable faces, as it was here that the first of some creepy crawlies appeared as well, with one of those groups being a classic fan favorite, the arachnids. And this included the now extinct order known as the Trigonotarbida, the spiders of old. Now, they superficially resembled extant spiders, but they did have some key differences, including a dorsal exoskeleton that was arranged in somewhat of a plate-like armor formation, and in some cases would even continue to evolve into more defenses later on, such as spines and tubercles. And then they also lacked the silk-producing spinnerets, something which we are obviously all familiar with. And thus far, it's known that they lived in Silurian North America and Europe, as well as at least one locality in Argentina, where they lived in a myriad of different environments, preying upon the unwary that came across them.
But still on the small side though.
But worry not, my arachnophobes, for this ancient order was no threat to large animals. As for one, they lacked venom, and two, they had inward-facing fangs that only allowed them to eat animals smaller than themselves.
Can modern spiders have that too, please?
And they weren't too big, with the largest being only the size of a wolf spider.
Ah, see?
So, in other words, basically a ball of kawaii. However, there were certainly bigger animals, and even arachnids, that I'm sure you noticed they landed or crawled on.
Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you!
And that was scorpions. Yep, it was here that scorpions also made their debut.
Okay, I will say I dislike scorpions. I don't know much about scorpions, truthfully, but I've just heard of scorpions stinging you, and since then I just don't want to meet one in real life. I think they are pretty cool looking animals if you look at them through a screen or like from very far away.
And these guys were so early into their development that some of them weren't even fully terrestrial yet, like the Scorpius. This member of the order Scorpiones could be found along Ontario's coast, which is probably not exactly where you'd expect scorpions to come from. And unlike most other Silurian scorpions, its tarsi was along that of modern ones, indicating that it could walk okayish on land, and it likely spent its time split along the beaches and shallow water, with the former allowing it to escape the true nightmares of this time. But we'll get to that later.
Ah, okay. So the true monsters were all underwater creatures. Well, again, I'd be safe on land, I'm fine.
Compared to spiders, this guy was also a giant, growing to be about 17 centimeters, or 6.7 inches long, so larger than a tarantula, whereas most other Silurian scorpions were quite a bit smaller. And given the somewhat unusual size of this guy, it was presumably the top dog on land, preying on smaller kin, other arachnids, and then another kind of animal at the time, flightless insects. Yeah, they were a thing too, so make sure to bring some bug spray. And then finally, there was one more creepy crawly that also liked fresh air. But it might be more accurate to call it
I'm sorry, I hate millipedes and centipedes. Look at how many legs. Nothing should have that many legs.
many crawlies. I'm talking about millipedes.
Oh, I hate it.
You know, those strange nightmare
I'm not going anymore. I'm not going into the past. Leave me alone.
producing worm-like myriapods with way too many legs. And although they might give you a fright nowadays, or at least me, during the Silurian, they were actually rather chill, being extremely small, as in smaller than your fingernail.
That's fine. I wouldn't even notice that thing being on me. That's cool.
And not to mention, they were primarily detritivores. And this makes things quite ironic, since despite being one very small animal, it's thought that these early millipedes were possibly what the giant prototaxites feared the most, as millipedes are known to eat decaying matter, as well as fungi, moss, etc. So if they were giant mushrooms, well, not good news for them. However, to be honest, even with all this strangeness, the lands of the Silurian were still relatively tame, at least in the sense that if you were transported here, you wouldn't really have to worry about harm coming to you from the existing life, and thus allowing you to take in the weirdness in all of its glory, undisturbed that is. But in the waters, things were a tad bit different, as life had more time to evolve and grow here, resulting in much more scary creatures. And this included, again, scorpions. Although, I'm not talking about true scorpions now, but rather sea scorpions, who are really the members of the extinct order known as the Eurypterids, who only superficially resembled present-day scorpions. And there was a pretty easy way to tell the two apart, with that being their size, as the sea scorpions were the Silurians' true giants when it came to animals, and they weren't exactly friendly ones either. Across the board, this group held varying diets, defenses, and weapons. But for the most part, they were predators and they liked meat. And already, certain genera at the time were pushing the human comfort level when it came to stature. For example, you had guys like the Extinct, who was probably not cute, and Carcinosoma, that were longer than the average NBA player is tall. and in some cases are even above 2.2 meters or
Shoosh.
7.2 feet.
Yeah, okay, stay away from the water. I don't want to mess with that. That's way too big for such an animal.
While weighing the same as a very large jaguar. And
160 kilograms! Oh, dude, that's massive.
you don't need me to tell you that jaguars are definitely large enough to ruin your day. And it wasn't just their size, as along with the size, these sea scorpions also possessed some features that displayed the very diverse ways in which they killed. For instance, in the Cuteramus, individuals had 2 giant pincers that
I hate the pincers, low-key. I
allowed
do.
them to grapple, catch, and manipulate prey, as well as snip them if need be, while their tail had then evolved into a paddle shape, suggesting that this predator swam after prey in a high-speed chase and pursuit, or ambush fashion. Meanwhile, the Carcinosoma went a fairly different route, having not 2, but multiple appendages at the front, all covered in spines.
I also don't love that, I'll be real.
That allowed it to essentially lay traps for prey, while then at the back of the body, it didn't have a paddle-like fluke, but rather a pointed telson, i.e. a stinger. A bit like that of modern-day scorpions, in fact. And while we don't know for sure if it was able to deliver venom through this pointy stick, I can confidently tell you that getting shanked by a stinger half the size of your arm would not have felt too good.
Yeah.
The saving grace here is that, as long as you don't swim too close to the bottom, you might be okay. As since it traded a tail fluke for a stinger, paleontologists don't think this creature was the best swimmer out there, and likely spent more of its time along the seafloor. And ultimately as a whole, sea scorpions had a range of different ways to kill animals, or eat. And not to mention that they also came in many different shapes and sizes, which is why that during the Silurian, this group was one of the most successful, diverse, and widespread, being essentially a staple in most ecosystems where life was abundant. Though thankfully the rest of the denizens of those ecosystems, these 2 examples were unusually large for the order, and not the normal trend. Yet, whilst this group was successful, they were by no means the only things occupying the seas and oceans. A shocker here, but fish were on the move too. And amongst them, included what was likely the largest vertebrate on the entire planet at the time, the megamastics. This was a type of Sarcopterygii, aka a lobe-finned fish, that perused the waters around the parts of land that would one day form modern China. Now, it didn't look like the craziest thing in the water, but
Yeah.
it definitely was one of the biggest, with adults being capable of measuring over 1 meter, or 3.3 feet. And again, this might not sound too crazy, but I mean,
For
it's still
back
big enough
then.
to gobble your hand or foot if it got confused, or if for some reason you decided to wiggle them in front of it, which I would likely advise against, as getting bit would not feel too comfy, as the megamastics sported durable teeth that were designed to crush hard-shelled animals. So your knuckles would definitely be hurting for a while.
It's okay. I want to say I'm not one to provoke fish, but I'm literally a bear, so catching fish is kind of my thing. Maybe this was a good warning for me, actually.
And past this guy, fish get quite a bit smaller.
This one looks cool. I really like that some of the fish that were shown in this video looked really, really different to modern fish. Of course, I don't think there is a 100% sure way to tell if they really looked like that, but it's very interesting.
Yet, the weirdness level actually goes skyrocketing up, as the megamastics is what I would consider normal looking for the time. And while it would take me days to go through every strange fish that lived during the Silurian, a few that surely would have stuck out to you were certain members of the now extinct class of fish known as the placoderms. Now, these guys are essentially the poster child for fish during the Silurian, and were easily recognizable thanks to their armored plates, which covered various parts of their bodies. And in the days of the late Silurian, this lot were doing pretty darn well, and multiple genera called this water's home, with one of the more weirder ones being the Chilinu, a small fish, no longer than your hand, that lived off the coast of China.
Look at that. That looks so peculiar. I love it.
And was exceptionally armored and long, giving it a very alien-like appearance. You could also find weird but somewhat cute fish, like the extinct Anaspida, meaning the shieldless ones, that were jawless little guys that were probably planktonic filter feeders.
That looks so interesting too.
They had pretty darn.
There you go. I think my model is covering some of it. They look really interesting. These truly look like out of Subnautica. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, the title was so correct.
Cute faces. I mean, just take a look at the Scottish Covilepsis. Absolutely adorable.
Right?
Meanwhile, if you were snorkeling around, some of the other groups you would have spotted were the odd Osteostraci that looked like they wanted to probe you or flay your mind. The predatorial but still relatively small Canthidae, which were one of the most successful groups during this time, and who are often referred to as spiny sharks, due to 1, their superficial shark-like appearance, and then 2, the presence of spikes along their bodies, which supported every single fin except for their tail. Furthermore, you also had the cartilaginous fish and bony fish as well. So the fish, pretty weird, but perhaps not as weird as the sea scorpions, as well as another marine arthropod that likely even had the sea scorpions beat when it came to pure weirdness. and that would be the rather obscure Thylacocephala.
Oh.
Simply
Okay, some of these are strange.
put, these guys are basically the tripods from the War of Worlds. But more scientifically speaking, they're typically described as having had large laterally flattened carapaces that cover the whole body, as well as large compounded eyes that were oh so bulbous, just adding that much more strangeness to their overall bizarre appearances.
Yeah.
Now, they were a very small bunch, but were mighty in numbers and range, being found throughout the world. And whilst not certain, we generally regard them as having been a type of primitive crustacean. We also don't know exactly what they were like, as far as how they lived goes, with many hypotheses on their lifestyles having been proposed. Some studies suggest that in general they were poor swimmers and lived in dimly lit environments, thus explaining their quote-unquote voluptuous eyes, where they would have utilized lurking and hiding in the seabed floor, just waiting for prey to come close enough into striking range, where they would then use their appendages to swiftly capture them.
I want to say they look kind of cute because of the big eyes, but they look so weird, it's hard to call them cute.
Now, others think they're more necrophages, meaning if you were somehow transported to the Silurian Sea, these guys might be responsible for your final resting place. Moving on, another type of arthropod that was abundant in these waters, and was perhaps the most classical animal known to the late Silurian, was the trilobites, who had appeared much earlier during the Cambrian stage.
Those are well known.
Cambrian stage, but were still kicking butt even now, and were represented by well over 100 different genera, meaning lots of variation when it came to size, niches, and habitats, with them kind of being like the birds today, just in the ocean. So it's safe to say that if you went in the water, you'd pretty much be guaranteed to see a trilobite. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally would have welcomed this, as while they are weird, they don't look nightmarish enough for me to get the heebie-jeebies from them.
Yeah, they kind of look alright. They're a bit weird looking, but not in a bad way, let's say like that.
Something which I definitely cannot say for the conodonts.
Oh yeah! Oh my god, I love these little guys! I watched another video of ExtinctZoo that also featured these guys. They're so fun.
A little more obscure, yet nearly equally successful group of jawless vertebrates, that if you've seen my other videos would know they're basically like lampreys from hell, looking an awful lot like them, but then instead of having some just plain old teeth, they had, as far as we can tell, the sharpest teeth to have ever evolved, being about 1/20th the width of a human hair, which allowed them to slice through flesh like you running your hand through water. And though the size of the conodonts meant they probably wouldn't have been interested in anything our size, I personally would not have wanted to test that hypothesis.
Someone commented under one of these videos that I need a conodont VTuber model, and you're so right. Like, they just look so iconic. I for real should get a VTuber model that looks like that.
And even just seeing one in the water would surely not be good for your well-being. So, suffice to say, this was one strange time for life on Earth, as well as for Earth itself. And depending on when you visited, things could be even weirder, as over the course of the Silurian, the planet saw 3 extinction events back-to-back. The Iravikan, Molde, and the Live event. Now, each were relatively minor events, but as a whole they had a noticeable effect on the planet, slowing down biological development and thinning out existing groups. Yet, thankfully for the life of the time, in the end the Silurian managed to reach its end without a major extinction event, which is quite the rarity. And it's because of this that going to the next period, the Devonian, we see Earth only starting to ramp things up, with the Silurian-Devonian terrestrial revolution, a time when land plants went a little crazy and colonized much of the surface, leading to yet even more funky times. However, that event, and the Devonian as a whole, is a story for another time.
Fair enough.
Thanks for watching, and until next time on ExtinctZoo.
That was really cool. I really feel like a lot of the creatures that were shown could straight up be from Subnautica, and that was super interesting.